Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to have Stefanie Overstreet on with us today. Stefanie, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself today?
Yeah, so I'm a registered nurse and a nutritional therapy practitioner, and I love to teach mamas how to have a more peaceful, supported postpartum grounded in the presence of God.
We're actually having her on the show today to talk with me about navigating chronic illness and chronic symptoms from a place of hope. Because this is something that we see with both of our client bases, have just felt like this is a really necessary conversation as we pursue healing, right? There still has to be this kind of internal process that we walk through.
These are some of the things that I had to learn, which are these mindsets of it's a long game. My
Yes,
body actually wants to heal, and if I can give it the things, the support and the things it needs, it actually wants to be healthy. It doesn't
totally.
want to exist in a state of sickness. A lot of
Mhm.
it, though, is having to learn how to get out of our own way,
Yep.
because a lot of times this is where I would love to save other women the hassle, especially postpartum.
Yes.
Um, a lot of times we do things that get in our own way, like
Yep.
dieting and taking conventional advice that maybe we hear out there on social media or wherever, and so is saying it works for them.
Yep.
And so we try it and we think it's going to work for us. And then it's like, well, it didn't work. So there's something, must be something wrong with me, instead
Right.
of realizing, no, I actually have to go on a journey of what does my body need? And I have to learn to speak my body's language
Ooh,
because
that's
it has a
good.
language all of its own.
Yep.
And it's like we were talking about this morning. I have to actually be willing to be inconvenienced and
Yes.
actually take some intentional time to listen to my body. I think that
That's
I'm just now
huge.
getting there. And this has been many years of chronic symptoms and many
Yep.
years. And I'm actually feeling better than I have in
Awesome.
years because I finally learned to speak my body's language. I finally learned
Ooh,
how
that's
to
good.
intentionally tune in
Yep.
and make some adjustments based on what does my body need, not what works for Susie, not what works for this diet program,
Yes, exactly.
all the other things, right?
That we've learned the hard way. And it's like when I tell people, I'm like, I've done it all. We literally, like, together have probably done it all. Like
Yeah.
intermittent fasting and not realizing I had gut issues and adrenal issues that totally made all of those things worse. Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's a whole other topic for a different day. But learning to speak your body's language and learning that your body's on the same team. And this is something that I have kind of tried to drill into my hormone clients over and over again. Like your symptom isn't there to annoy you.
Right.
It's not there to like, yes, it's
It's
frustrating,
body's language.
but it's there for a reason. And
Mhm.
I'm just as guilty of this myself, where I ignore a symptom because it's not inconvenient enough for me,
Mhm.
like to register on my radar. Like that happens to all of us, right? Where it's just not, it hasn't prioritized itself enough up here to where it's like, oh, I'm stressed, or oh, I'm not managing this emotional thing very well, until the cart tips over. And then all of a sudden we realize there was a lot in that cart that I thought I was managing well. And this, I think this is true for a lot of us in different seasons, right? Where we go through hard things, or the burden, the emotional, physical, spiritual burden that we
Mhm.
weren't aware that we were carrying all of a sudden becomes too much, and the body's like waving the white flag, like somebody help me out, and it comes up in all these very inconvenient symptoms, which for I know that you share about this, but like in postpartum we have to do the inconvenient things of asking our partner to help us, and maybe that's really hard, right? Maybe we haven't had those conversations. I know for me, I felt like I had to prove how good of a mom I was. There was a lot of reasons for that. My husband did not need me to prove how good of a mom I was. He didn't know that I was having a hard time. And so, had I learned, like, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to need naps, it's okay to have people come in and help me, that would have, I mean, from an emotional standpoint alone, would have done wonders. But from the physiologic standpoint, it's, we have to address the belief systems that we have about meeting our needs as well, especially when it comes to managing a chronic illness. And I will just speak about this from the perspective of raising a child with chronic illness, because that's primarily been kind of forefront, front and center of our life, and how to maintain that position of hope and healing and contending for healing, and not saying this is the end all be all, this is all it's ever going to be. Because to me, that feels very hopeless and is just not a place I ever felt I could land. Like for me personally, that doesn't mean I don't accept the limitations of the diagnosis of PANDAS. But what it means is I'm still going to keep moving forward in hope of giving my child a better life and giving our family a better life, and not just going to sit back and take it. Right. But with that, and I would say, I mean, just the friends that I have, and myself included, walking through different illnesses and things, there does have to be, when we're talking about the emotional experience, there does have to be that place where we don't just power through, and we don't just white knuckle it to the end, where we have to say, I'm experiencing grief here because maybe we had a 2-month long regression that we didn't see coming. And do you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, I wasn't expecting that. I thought we're on this trajectory of healing, and now this new thing has come up. And so really allowing that self-compassion to say, this is hard. And to say, like, I really don't like this. This is really hard. And I need to wrestle through and just kind of let my emotions kind of sift and sort their way out until I get back to that place of hope. Because the times that I've shoved it down and pretended that I wasn't in pain, or pretended that it didn't cause immense suffering as a mom to watch my child go through this thing, or to watch my family go through this thing, I would be lying to myself and to God. And I would be ignoring all of the internal cues that I'm not okay. Right. Which deserves to have a place. And our body does the same thing, where it's like, hey, I'm not okay. We need to sort some things out here. And so I know for me, it's very much mirrored that grief process of, denial, bargaining, acceptance, depression and anger, or anger and depression. And they all kind of, and if I were to just stop and label them and say, how dare you be depressed, or how dare you be angry, or judge myself for bargaining, or judge myself for wanting to be out of the situation, I would be perpetually stuck there. And it's not a fun place to be. And so I think, and I'd love to hear how you personally have navigated that, because I know you've done a lot of work there. But we have to just allow the room for it, because the reality is that we can't, as much as we can do, partnering with God, partnering with our bodies, partnering with our doctors, there is a timeline that we don't have control over, right?
Absolutely.
And that in itself was like its entire own grief process, because I thought we would be healed at 2 years, right? And here we are, like 4 years in, and we're getting there, but it's not at all what I thought it would look like. We have to, that in itself, receiving the diagnosis, walking through the grief of that, and reconciling what does that mean for me, and what am I willing to accept and not accept, has to be done, right? We have to allow for that. And the more that we can do that, I think the better able it makes us to be able to handle flares or regressions, right? A flare up of symptoms, like for you, that might be SIBO, or maybe it's a mom who walked through, intense postpartum the first time, and the second time had more of like a latent response, right? And so she thought she made it through, and then all of a sudden there's this blip of something. And it enables us to walk through that with a lot more grace for ourselves. But also, I feel like for me, it enables me to connect with the Father a lot easier, because I'm able to recognize I don't have to push through this. He wants to meet me here. And you know what I'm saying? And that's going to help me to push through this, but I need to be present to what's happening in my body and my emotions right now. So that's been a little bit about my journey with that piece of things, is just really allowing the emotions to be what they are. But do you want to share a little bit about how you've kind of reconciled the emotions or allowed that to inform you even of, your healing process?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. And I think part of, you've alluded to this, and this is a whole topic in and of itself, but I think part of what enables us to build that resilience as we're facing something chronic, or something that it's like, okay, this is a long game that I'm in. This isn't going to be fixed overnight. It really is figuring out, where is our hope going to be anchored?
Yes.
Because if our hope is in our circumstances, if our hope is, like for me, in having perfect health or never having a SIBO relapse, or even after, so I spent years after I had my first daughter really trying to take care of my health and get those symptoms to a better
Right.
place. When I had my second baby, the house didn't burn down again. I didn't want to
Yes.
put my
Right.
family through that suffering. So we have a 6-year age gap, because I was intentional to make sure that when we
Right.
did this again, we're not going to have everything go sideways. But the truth is, like, if my hope was in a circumstance like having a better postpartum the next time, or getting out of chronic symptoms, or whatever the circumstance may be, we're
Yes.
going to find that that's not going to sustain us,
No.
because, like you said, we can't control our circumstances. We can't control the timeline or how things play out.
Right.
So it is like that foundational piece of, we have to find our hope somewhere else, or
Right.
in someone else. And so that eternal perspective of the hope that we find in our relationship with Jesus, that really is kind of your thing that is grounding, and it's like what
Yes.
you're tethered to. And
Absolutely.
so when you have that, then you are able to kind of move into this place of processing the grief, and giving the emotions space, because you have this hope that you're able to come back to. And so, talking about the emotions part of it, I think that's definitely an ongoing journey. I think you're so right. Denial and all of those things are not going to be the best way to go about it. But I think acknowledging those emotions and
Yes.
just allowing them to be,
Right.
instead of fixing, or, shushing, or whatever kinds of
Right.
things we do to try to, it really is kind of the process of learning to lean into the discomfort, and really
Absolutely.
just allow the emotions to be what they are. But I do think too, there's something really powerful, and I think you do a great job of teaching this, but learning how, in that place, like, while we're acknowledging the emotions and we're present to them, but we also can point ourselves back to the truth.